for over 6 years. And also with Dobbins Patterson Learning for the last 2 years, where I've been serving numerous tribes and from all HUD and BIA regions in various training and technical assistance capacities, whether it be through webinars like this, through Native Learning Center, on-site training and technical assistance, conferences, and all of that. I graduated from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with a Bachelor of Arts in History, and I also hold a master's degree from the Center of Indigenous Nation Studies at the University of Kansas, where my focus was in tribal human resources. I'm so glad to be with you guys today. It's been quite some time since I've done a Cathedra webinar, probably since like last summer, I guess. And I'm actually coming to you guys live from the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribes Housing Authority this afternoon. I've been here in Oklahoma all week working with the Kiowa Tribe and the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribe Housing Authorities, going through things such as NAHASDA Essentials and, again, building tribal housing capacity. And so it just worked perfect that we had this webinar, planned for this week, where my team that's upstairs, they're able to join in. They're watching from the other side of the building. And, I'm hoping that all of you guys get, a good experience with this, and that you all, learn something to kind of help build your capacity as we kind of move forward into that grant writing season, and, with all of your development projects you probably have going on and all of that. So if you guys could take a few minutes, if you could go ahead and put in your chat box, a little bit about yourself, what your name is, what tribal housing authority or organization you're from, what your role is in tribal housing. That'll kind of give me a good idea how to summarize some of my examples and things like that we'll look at this afternoon. I'll give you guys just a minute to introduce yourselves. And then while you guys are doing that also, just to kind of let you know and reiterate what Lewis mentioned, feel free throughout the presentation, if you have any comments, questions, or whatnot, feel free to throw them in the chat box. I like making my webinars, very open to everyone to be able to provide, input and comment and topics. We'll have an opportunity to answer some, do some Q&A at the end, as well as, throughout the presentation. So make this yours, provide, give any of that input in stuff that you can that may help your housing authority. So thank you guys for providing all of that. Welcome all of you, Darlene, Jelani, Joyce, Nathaniel. Thank you for being here. So a little bit of what we'll look at today. First, we're going to look at, some of the basic aspects of, building your capacity, what it takes to bring staff in, how do you recruit them, and how you retain your housing staff. Once you have a good housing staff on board, how do we build the capacity of them? There's an important aspect of professional development involved in capacity building. It doesn't include just, those trainings and conferences and things like that we go through, and we'll look at that, throughout this afternoon. So let me start by asking you all a question. One of the greatest challenges that we see in many of our tribal organizations is the inability to recruit and retain good managers and staff. Why is that? I'd like to, get some input from all of you as we kind of get started, why you think we see some challenges within our tribal housing authorities or within our communities on recruiting and retaining, the management staff, and making them, want to stay within our organization. See a couple of you guys typing, so I'll give you guys a minute. Welcome, Tiara and Wes. Jelani says poor recruiting due to improper assessment of tribal resources. Yeah, I mean, and we'll look at that here in a few minutes, on some things that we can do to kind of help those recruiting efforts, when you're looking and sourcing through staff. I'll give you guys just a minute or two more. Employee costs, confusing federal, state, and local programs, as well as location, exactly. No commitment to sustaining administrative capacity. Yep, we'll look at that as well today on, how we can commit to that capacity building and sustaining it. Now, you guys, funding, yep, funding is another, big area. And we'll discuss, some obstacles, some more of these obstacles and how we can kind of alleviate the stress on you guys. Lack of poor training, exactly. There's a lot of that. I mean, in Indian country, it is difficult. Location is definitely one of those areas. If you don't have the economic development on the tribal side to, kind of provide, additional services and homes and things like that, it's difficult to get people to come either back to the reservation, and or stay in the area and fulfill these positions. That lack of commitment, whether it be from the tribal side or your board of commissioners, to make or even management to make sure staff wants to stay. And so, we'll look at all of these options, or all of these issues today. We have a people management system within, any type of industry that you work in, not just tribal housing. First, when we're managing people and we look at those issues, one of the big things, like you guys also have mentioned, is, location, it limits the skilled workers. Sometimes it's just a lack of understanding of what your organization needs, not knowing, what the capacity areas are, how you can fulfill them, not knowing that you can utilize outside resources like consultants or contractors to help fill your capacity gaps. Another area, that we see a lot here in Indian country too, is that fear of change, not knowing, what the future holds if we do add additional staff or if we add a new program and things like that. I do think I've seen, that fear of change alleviate a little bit over the last 2 years with COVID, because we were forced to change so quickly. With all of the housing authorities I've worked with, over the last 2 years, one of the things I am proud to say that I've even heard from even the tribal administration side is that it was the housing authorities over the last 2 years that have really held those communities together, where councils and the tribal administration tried to figure out how to manage those resources and additional funding they were getting in. Housing took those resources that they received, those funding resources, and they just jumped in, and they started making changes. They provided, for their tenants, they provided for other tribal members, and they forgot that this is just changing the outlook of how we have always worked in tribal housing, and that fear just dissipated, and we just did. And so, now we have this standard that, we can kind of alleviate that fear of change, and realize, this can be our new norm. And, this is how we can, work and move forward to help our community. And then reputation is another. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure all of you guys have, heard all of, we have those naysayers within our communities, that may have worked for housing under a different administration, or they may have worked, for, a different entity that heard these bad things about housing, and, reputation kind of, precedes itself. And so when we have those naysayers in there, and things like that, it makes it difficult for people to want to come and work with us. But at the same time, like I was saying, as far as what we've experienced during COVID, we are starting to build new staff, I believe, in Indian housing. We have these various funds through Department of Treasury that we've seen where we've been able to bring in new employees to kind of help fund those programs. We're being able to help. And so our reputation, whether it was positive or negative before, I feel like has actually grown, and the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. And so more people are wanting to come and work for our housing authorities and provide, that experience and um, that warmth and what's another term I'm looking for? That we are actually out there making a difference within our communities and promoting that change in a positive way and bringing people closer together. So when we look at that people management act, overall, how do we manage the staff we have? How do we get them in there? How do we retain them? And then what do we do moving forward? People management is a circular cycle. It's first you have to attract and recruit those individuals. So alleviating those issues that we just looked at, and attracting new people, recruiting them the appropriate way. Then figuring out how to retain them. Once you have someone on staff for 6 months to a year, I feel, you're doing a good job of retaining them. If there's not issues and things like that, just being able to then to build them and develop into someone that can build that capacity within your organization, within themselves. And then if things aren't working, being able to consistently review and make change. I think those are all important aspects of how we manage the individuals within our organization. I see a couple of other, comments that people have also thrown out there, that there's multiple interpretations of the policies and laws and the regulations across all the levels of housing. Oh, absolutely. While I've been here today, this week, with the tribes, those are one of the things we've discussed, how do we interpret these policies and laws? Obviously, your interpretation, we are sovereign nations, we're able to interpret things individually as a housing authority and then bring those interpretations to HUD and ask, is this something we can do? Are we understanding this correctly? Or working with consultants, to understand those things and then help, expand our people management skills. And then, as Darylyn said, unsure of what credentials are required to qualify for federal and state funding. No, absolutely. In a few minutes, we'll kind of look at some of the credentials that are needed for some of the HUD opportunities that are out there. And I will tell you, building your capacity and having a capacity, a staff that can do the job is one of the first questions at the state and federal level funding opportunities that they ask. They want you to prove that you have the staff, the financial capacity, and the management capacity to run any of these projects, that you're doing. So, as we look at this, we need to figure out, where do we start? Where do we start with, building that capacity within our organization? Even if you have, someone on, individuals already on board, you can kind of backtrack to some of these if need be and start fresh. First, you need to have an understanding of what your organizational chart looks like. When was the last time any of you, really looked at your org chart and determined, is this hierarchy really fitting? Do we need to kind of readjust maybe some of our program areas at the administrative level and move people into other areas and departments that fit better? Obviously we can't, delineate from the org chart too much. We still have to, report to a board of commissioners and a tribal council in some level. But when we get into our programmatic level, being able to understand who, is overseeing what department or what individual is important. First there's this functional organizational structure that, everyone can utilize to organize, almost our departments and our programs into teams. They're all organized into a purpose or function of a specific job. This is the type of organizational structure I see in a lot of our housing authorities. They, where it says general manager there, we typically have, our executive director, and then we may have a finance and HR department, or finance and development department or something like that. And then that blue area there, that's where we have our individual programs and the staff under each of those. Those functional structures, typically work really well with TDHEs. It's a little harder to gauge when you're a tribal department and you run under the organizational structure of the tribe. But again, you can even have those kind of internal departmental structures to kind of help fund, or funnel things throughout the appropriate channels within your housing authority. Here's just kind of an example of, if you're a housing department, what your organizational structure may look like. You have your general counsel, you've got your tribal council, and, your boards. You may have an executive director that oversees various aspects of the organization. That tribal structure really gets kind of complicated, and you may report to a business committee and not necessarily council. And so, if you're a tribal housing authority or housing department, having that understanding of the structure of the tribe is also, is very important. When you look at a TDHE organizational chart, we report to a board of commissioners, and then the executive director, reports directly to them, and then they oversee the departments and the staff at various levels. And then you may have multiple people across the administration aspect that oversee individual departments, like admissions and occupancy, or maybe a development department, or various programs. If you're doing this properly, if you're organizing your structure of your housing authority, you end up putting the right people in the right positions. Analyzing and assessing. If somebody's not working in one area, but you feel that they have a good skill set towards you, move them into a different location. Better utilize your organization's inventory of skills. That's okay. Help your leaders prioritize. The tasks at hand, and help your staff make decisions. In the end, when we're developing our capacity, it is all about the balance. And some of the things that our organizational designs, need to take into consideration is, our strategy. What's our mission? How are we, moving towards the goals that we want? And are the right people there doing that? We also need to look at our organizational size. I work with housing authorities where they have one person, an executive director only, and I work with way larger ones that have multiple departments, 50 staff, 100 staff, and there are still ways to strategize, and build capacity even at those, levels with one or two individuals. You also need to look at the environment you work in. Is it a toxic environment? Are employees all disgruntled, or, are they getting along? Are they working together? And making, changes there if need be. You also need to look at your internal controls. Do you have the policies in place that, work along with the regulations, and all of that? And then, provide incentives. Why do people want to stay? What are those incentives? Are they benefits? Are they a work-life balance? What are those? Making sure you take all of those things into consideration as you start building your capacity. Keep in mind that in order to do the jobs that we are all assigned to do, we have to have those tools and resources given to us to do our jobs effectively. We do, whether it be funding, whether it be, support of our management staff or our board of commissioners or the tribe, we have to have those resources available to us, or we can't get our jobs done. One of the first resources, that we need to have when starting working with an organization is a very good, solid job description. I can't tell you how many organizations that I've worked with that, their job description is the same as what ad they took out in the newspaper. It doesn't really define what their job duties are, things like that, or what the full position entails. And with that, you can't assess, what your needs are or what your capacity is with, a simple little paragraph. You need to have a job description that helps a candidate and the management staff understand the duties and responsibilities of that position and what the relative importance of those duties are. Third, you need to make sure that position contributes to the mission, the goals, and the objectives of the organization. And so oftentimes, you may have some positions within a housing authority that are constant, your finance people, your executive director, admissions and occupancy. But you may start developing new programs where you realize your goals and objectives change and you need new staff and additional staff, and how are those positions going to contribute to those goals and objectives that you're defining, years later. Job descriptions make an organization effective by ensuring that the work you're carrying out is aligned with that mission. It also helps management staff clearly identify the most appropriate employee for the duties and responsibilities of the position. It kind of becomes that template when you're going through the recruitment phase of, can these individuals do the job we're asking them to do? And then it also helps provide a foundational overview of the position that you're, applying for, that you're hiring for those managers and staff. So I know you're probably asking, what do you mean by foundational overview? So foundational overview is a series of 7 steps, 8 steps that help you, really define what a job description is going to do for your organization, and what an employee overall will do. First, at that recruitment aspect, a job description is used to detail those job duties, those functions, those roles and responsibilities of an open position. From there, a job description helps you in the selection process. It helps you define the interview questions that you're going to be asking. It's going to set that hiring criteria that you need to make the selection for the best candidate. Then it's going to move you into that new hire orientation aspect. You've got the person on staff, and that job descriptions helps that individual understand what their position is, who they report to, what their role is within the organization, and how it also relates and interacts with all of the other positions. After that employee's been there a while, that job description then also helps with the professional development aspect. They help supervisors identify areas where an employee may need professional development or training. Maybe you're starting to add levels to a job description. Those bullet points are changing a little bit. Maybe they need a little bit additional support. It'll help those supervisors identify that. A job description also helps when you're determining what the compensation is going to be. Is this person overseeing other individuals? That's going to lead to more compensation than someone that is, just a support person and doesn't have people that they are, that report to them. That list of roles, responsibilities, and school sets. All of those things are used to determine what the compensation is going to be for an employee. Later, after they've been there for a few months, 6 months, a year, you utilize those job descriptions for your performance evaluations, and determining, are they meeting those line items of the roles and responsibilities that you set forth. And then if they aren't, they also provide a footing for that legal aspect. Like if your employee is let go for poor performance, that job description helps kind of set the mold in defending your decision that you didn't fulfill the obligations of what your roles and responsibilities are. And so it is, an important aspect to have a strong job description because it will follow that employee throughout, the life cycle of their role within the organization. So some of the housing positions that are out there, that I've worked with, that I've seen at various levels. We have our board of commissioners, we have an executive director, we may have a finance department if and that could have multiple roles within there. You may have just one finance director that handles everything. You may have a finance person that has AP and AR, maybe a grant writer or development person, maybe someone that handles benefits. You may have a development individual or development department where, maybe a team of grant writers or housing developers, individuals that work maybe in the real estate side or the construction side, in various aspects, the management side of that. You may have a human resources department that have various roles within there. Admissions and occupancy, again, that's another area where you may have one person, you may have multiple people, maybe individuals that do only home buyers and others that do, the rental side. Maintenance and construction, that's another area where you have, multi-level facets of individuals working within a maintenance and construction department. Um, some of you may have Ross departments and Ross programs where, that's its own department in and of itself. Are there any unique housing positions that any of you guys have within your organizations that I may not have mentioned here um, that you care to share with us? All right, I don't see anyone typing, so I'm going to assume we've covered most of them. So, we've gone through that recruitment phase and everything, so how do you choose who we're bringing on? How do we, decide who's going to work with us? Whether you have a fully functioning HR department or whether you're just an executive director, there are steps in place, as you build that capacity. There is an interview process involved. You don't want to just look at applications and then decide, oh, this is the person we want and have them come in and start. Go through a process, do a phone screen first, talk to those individuals on the phone. You know, review applications, ask a few basic questions, and shortlist those sort of suitable candidates that you want to bring in for, more direct interviews. A telephone screen can, be, ask, some of these very, specific questions. What attracted you to the position? Why do you want to work with us? What skills and knowledge and experience can you bring to the position? And what are your strengths and areas for development? Those are all basic phone screen questions that you can ask that really gauge, how an individual responds and whether they may or may not be a good fit. Those telephone screens, no longer than 15, 20 minutes. You don't need to get into a lot of detail because that's where you'll do that with, the next interview process, those formal interviews in person. As a rule, I always, suggest selecting at least the top 10% of your top scorers to bring in for the in-person interview. Now, there are times when you can kind of skip that phone screen process. Maybe you're only getting a few individuals, that have applied, two or three or four, something like that. Maybe you just bring them all in if they all seem to be a good fit. You don't have to phone screen anyone anyway. Reviewing their resumes ahead of time to source, whether they actually meet the qualifications of the job is where, you determine who you're going to interview. Um, an interview panel should consist of, an odd number of people at best. Maybe someone from human resources, a position supervisor, an executive director, and include the board of commissioners. If you are a small staff, involving, someone from maybe the BOC and the executive director is important. But also keep in mind, obviously, a lot of us are related. We don't want to have nepotism and things like that. And maybe, you have to pull in someone from the tribal level to sit in on those interviews, or maybe the BOC needs to be the one performing those interviews. There are ways to avoid that conflict of interest or that nepotism area when doing that interview process. When you're going through those formal interviews, there are a variety of things you need to keep in mind. You want this interview structured. You have a very, have a set of questions there in front of you that you're going to ask, but also make sure that these questions are behavioral based questions, that they aren't just answering yes or no. Behavioral based questions are those that ask you to, things such as, tell us about a time that you worked for an organization and had to deal with a difficult employee. What did you do in that situation? You want them to talk and engage with you and describe, how they handled the situation and what they, maybe what they learned from it. You also want to ask those experience-based questions, what their responsibilities were in a previous position that may or may not be related to what they're applying for. Um, Maybe there's some testing that needs to be involved. Maybe someone's applying to be a laborer or, an upper level maintenance position, and you want to understand, their skill sets. And so maybe they do some type of, whether it's hands-on or, written testing. Have a determination of how you're going to score and weigh those questions and answers, before you make a decision. Also keep in mind that we do have that exception for Indian preference. So, you may give extra scoring points if you have, one native and one non-native, and you're not sure who to choose in making those decisions. Oops. Oh, Darlene says, we have an HR department who is responsible for departmental hiring. The development of job descriptions is what I'm responsible for, and then the HR matches applicants with the job description. Perfect. No, I mean, I highly agree that, whether HR and someone else, whether it's the, management level staff that, for the department you're hiring for, there should be at least two people, involved if you have the capacity to do that and developing those job descriptions, making sure, you're matching, the applicable applicants with those. So no, that's a great way to start. Like I said, we want to avoid that nepotism and that conflict of interest. Recuse yourself, from interviews if you're related to, to an individual within the parameters of your policy. Be transparent, discuss potential conflicts of interest with your board of commissioners, maybe before you start that interview process, so that everyone can make the best decision, and you don't deal with situations that, end up extending that recruitment and hiring process. And then when you're doing that, keep in mind that personality is key. You want someone working for you that's honest and trustworthy and reliable. Someone, intelligent and respectful, enthusiastic, but at the same time, professional, adaptable, and a team player. No one wants to bring in anyone that, you already know you can't trust, or isn't reliable. Do those reference checks. Reach out, if they've worked with the tribe. Is this person hireable or not? Or with former workers? Uh, Making sure they can communicate. In tribal housing, customer service is of utmost importance. You don't want someone that's going to be rude when they're answering the phone or talking to tenants and things like that. You need someone also that's going to be able to adapt to the changes and the constant flow that we see within Indian housing. And working together as a team is also important. So we've got them on board. We've got them there. How do we retain them? How do we keep them going? Keep in mind that it's more efficient to retain a quality employee than it is to recruit, train, and orient a replacement employee of the same quality. So unless this person that you're bringing on board is just, you got them there and everything they said that they would do and say in the job description or in their interview process is wrong. It was, they just came in and completely lied, and you need to get rid of them. Maybe they're not up to par where you thought they were, but they're a good hard worker and they're willing to learn. It's just taking a little longer than you thought. Train them, keep them on board, work with them, to develop that capacity versus, going through that recruitment process all over again. One of my favorite sayings from the HR perspective is time is money and money is time. And so if you're spending more time recruiting people than, retaining them, that's a lot of money that we're wasting along the way. And a survey that happened, been quite a few years. It's been, since 2016, this survey came out, but I think, it still kind of holds true, even, this many years, even after COVID, that employees identified these 5 factors as leading contributors to job satisfaction. 1, respectful treatment of all employees at all levels. No one wants to go to a job where we don't feel like we're respected. Compensation and pay is another area where, we want to make sure that we are being compensated for the job we're doing and compensated in a respectful way. Keeping in mind that compensation, doesn't include just that base hourly salary, that we're providing them with benefits and, work-life balance and all of these things that have a dollar value assigned to it as well. You also want there to be trust. Employees and management need to be able to trust each other and work together. We also want to know that there's job security. If there's constant turnover and you're always firing people and things like that, I doubt other employers are going to feel safe in their job within the organization. And then you want to make sure that they have the opportunities to use their skills and their abilities on the job. So effective retention practices that lead to building that capacity, it's that recruitment, it's socialization, working together, training and development, that compensation and rewards that we just talked about, that supervision aspect. You don't want micromanagers, but you don't want someone that's just thrown to the wolves and told to just go get the job done. You want to help them along the way. And then that employee engagement, having the staff involved in, the decision-making processes and strategic planning processes across your organization. Some other factors, that we have all started taking into consideration over the last 2 years that, have actually led to positive change is that work-life balance and flexible work arrangements. For so long, we were told, nope, you've got to be in the office. There's no way you could do this at home. There's no way. Well, guess what? We were all forced to be at home for, some of us over 2 years, and so there's options now out there to kind of help that work-life balance and provide us, those mental health breaks or the support that we need, to kind of, sustain our jobs, but also sustain our households. Telecommuting is a good aspect, having those flexible work arrangements where employees can spend all or a portion of the week working from home and then in the office some days. Um, Flex time, giving employees the opportunity or the option to structure their workday or work week based on the number of hours required. I've seen some flex time happening like with the maintenance staff. Maybe some of the staff works 4 10s Monday through Thursday, and the other staff works 4 10s Tuesday to Friday. Flexible, having flexible times like that. Um, and that also lends to those compressed work weeks, not just on, the um, maintenance side, but also even within our normal staff. Maybe some of them go to school and they want to work those 4 10s, or they're working 40 hours in 3 days, or maybe they come in on a Saturday because they're going to get more done. Doing some job sharing where maybe two part-time employees share the same position. And then having permanent part-time arrangements. These are, alternatives that, maybe that 20 to 29 hours a week. And those employees decide which days they work and how long they work for on those days. So these are some other options there. So we've got the staff there, we retain them. Now what do we do? What do we do from here? We build that capacity. We've got great staff on board. They've been with us, at least, 6 months to a year. They're doing a great job. They lend that credibility to our program. And we want them to stay on board, and we want them to grow with us as an organization, because us as an organization are always growing and changing. So you have to understand what capacity building is. Capacity building is that process by which individuals and organizations obtain, improve, and retain, just like we just discussed, skills, knowledge, tools, equipment, and other resources they need to do their jobs competently. It's a process we're all learning as we go to trainings and conferences and stuff. We're all building our capacity, and we're learning what we need to do to kind of continually grow our organization and build the capacity of our organization as a whole. I like this quote here. An empowered organization is one in which individuals have the knowledge, skills, desire, and opportunity to personally succeed in a way that leads to the collective organizational success. When you have a successful organization, you have reached the goal of building that capacity and being able to, move forward with your projects and programs in a structured, organized way that leads to the success of your tribe and your community. Again, back to what we said at the beginning, I like to remind people of this halfway through. We have to have those tools and resources that we need to do our jobs effectively. We all do. It doesn't matter what area we work in, we need to have those tools and resources available to us. So how do we get those tools? Those come from our management level. So how do we determine, if we have effective management on board that are helping us, build the capacity of ourselves and our organization? One, like we looked at the beginning, you have to have that appropriate organizational structure, having an understanding of that organization, knowing what's there in your org chart. You have to use performance standards and goals. So having those quarterly or annual performance reports. We all have to submit performance reports to HUD on what we're doing, as an organization. We should be doing the same internally with our staff, and setting those standards. Not only should our staff and our management level, be continuing to grow their capacity, we need to have a governing board that's knowledgeable of our work. So having a board of commissioners that's taking NAHASDA essentials, and maybe some procurement classes or grant management classes, so they have an understanding of how our, even though they're not running our day-to-day, they need to have an understanding of how our day-to-day works so they can make knowledgeable decisions at that management level, as a board. We need to know that the objectives of our organization are clearly stated and understood. And so having staff involved in the IHP planning or strategic planning processes, so that they know what their programs and departments are going to be doing in the upcoming years. Having those effective policies and procedures in place is also important. Um, Having open communication up and down the organization. Everyone's talking to each other. There's transparency. We all know what's happening. And if we don't know what's happening, we know who we can ask questions to find out how to make a difference within that. And then also having effective and timely reporting of those major functions. This is one area I want to stress that we need to be on top of. Now that HUD has changed our reporting requirements as far as the APR goes, and or not the APR, I'm sorry, your SF 425s, and that's moved over to, annual instead of quarterly. We need to still make sure, we're doing, our own due diligence internally of having, understanding where those major functions are at that quarterly level. And so even though we don't have to submit the reports till the end of the year, keeping that, kind of process in place quarterly is going to be important, I think, to us. So how do we determine, what those capacity skills are, for ourselves that we need and for our organization? One of the best ways to do that is, do a SWOT analysis. Do one of yourself and then do one of your organization as a whole. That is the best way to determine what the capacity of you as an individual and your organization is. This can be completed by a board of commissioners, an executive director, your staff, anyone. Anyone can do a SWOT analysis. You're probably asking, what's a SWOT analysis? I haven't seen that before. A SWOT analysis is what we utilize. Thanks, Darlene. See, I read your mind. I knew exactly what you were going to ask. A SWOT analysis is where you sit down and look at the strengths, the weaknesses, and the opportunities and the threats to yourself as an individual, in your role within the organization and the organization as a whole. And these SWOT analysis take a few things into consideration. And we do have some other um, webinars that Native Learning Center does where we actually really dive into the SWOT analysis and logic models and planning, strategic planning and things like that. This is a very surface level analysis of what SWOT is, but it'll give you an idea of where to start. You can Google SWOT analysis and there's forums out there that kind of help you determine, how to, do a SWOT of yourself or your organization. So when you're looking at the strengths, you want to ask yourself, what are the strengths of your organization? What are your strengths as an individual employee? These are those internal or inside the organization strengths, and that you have. So think internally there. What are your weaknesses? What are my weaknesses? Again, this is an internal component of the organization or of yourself. What opportunities exist in your environment or what opportunities exist for me. So these are those external things, oh, wait, there's this professional training development opportunity coming up at, NIHC next month. I really want to go take that admissions and occupancy course, or I want to take that grant management course. Oh, I see that's going to be next month. Let me go to my director because I really feel that this will benefit my role and function in the finance department. Knowing what the opportunities are that are out there. And then what are the threats? What are those external factors that you can't control that may threaten, that capacity building aspect? Funding is one area that you guys, put there. That interpretation of the policies is another area. I'm going to give you guys a quick example of what I've seen over the years. This is just kind of some summary points when I've done some SWOT analysis of what people have seen. The ones highlighted are those that are very specifically focused on that capacity building aspect. So, internal strengths are things like staff expertise, knowing your job and your function within your organization. Some other strengths, having a good attitude, strong leadership, you're having a strong, vision and mission, knowing what your goals are. And maybe your organization does do professional development and training. Maybe they do let you go. So that is a good strength for your organization. Weaknesses, maybe there's that lack of professional development. You haven't gone to training in a long time. Other weaknesses include things like fear of change, something we talked about earlier, where your location is. Internal politics is another one. Or maybe we have a lack of internal controls. If we have that weaknesses of a lack of internal control, that is an area that we need to work on so we can build our capacity stronger, because that is something they will ask as far as what our internal controls are when we're developing projects and programs. And then looking at those external opportunities, are we growing too quickly? That might be a good thing. I mean, I know in housing over the last few years, with all of this funding, we've been able to grow and really change our programs pretty rapidly. Are there training and development opportunities out there for you? Native Learning Center, you're in one right now. This is a professional development opportunity for you, and they're free. So you don't have to worry about that external threat of funding. If anything, it's just delegating your time to yourself for the last hour. Maybe you have a good location and you're located in an area where you have those resources available to you. And there's good relationships and you have, that funding available. Um, I can promise you, most of your housing authorities have some funding there that you can allocate a very small portion to allow that professional development to happen, and build the capacity of your organization. You just have to know where to look and how to leverage those resources. And then looking at those external threats. Maybe there's that political structure, or elections happening. Again, that affects your capacity. Maybe, there's other competition, a weak economy. All of those things, could affect how you build or not build your capacity. So when we're building our individual capacity, how do we do that? Some things to take into mind. One, like we've just talked about, training. Training is one of the best way. Go out there and continue to learn. Whether it be a free Native Learning Center training like this, or maybe you're going to, a larger, facility. Maybe you're going on site to Native Learning Center. Maybe you're asking for a consultant like me to come on site to you to train you guys, in person. The training is out there. You just need to know where to look for it. Follow HUD is constantly, and all of the ONAP regions are constantly posting, I think, each week through their newsletters what training opportunities are available, through Native Learning Center, NIHC, and all of those other organizations. Doing mentorships. That's another area, learning from those that already have the expertise and experience, is an important way. I know when before I started working on my own as a consultant, I had a wonderful mentor at a housing authority that felt confident, and I grew my confidence within Indian housing. And she was able to say, no, Brandy, go out on your own and do this job and help everybody else too. And so having those good mentors within your organization is also important. And then how do we build our organizational capacity? First is going to be, hire new people or seek volunteers with expertise. Um, like I said at the beginning, recruiting and retaining those staff and volunteers that have the relevant knowledge is important. It's a lot easier to start growing your knowledge, even if you came in, at the very entry level of, understanding of NAHASDA. Once you know that, continue to grow on it. I mean, the work we do is constantly changing. And so you develop your expertise over time. There aren't very many of us experts out there, that understand Indian housing. So continue to mentor those that may not. And at the same time, as an individual, grow that organizational capacity by bringing those experts in. Another way to, grow that capacity and utilize experts is forging partnerships with other organizations. It's okay to hire consultants if you feel like there's a gap in your capacity. What organizations or other housing authorities working with? Could a partnership complement your project or your activity? A lot of times collaborations make sense, both in terms of avoiding that duplication of services, as well as optimizing the work that both groups are performing. And then another is just investing in new technology. There's so many technological innovations out there right now within, Indian housing that we could utilize to cut down on, the administrative burden that we see. And it frees our staff to do a more important task, like meeting with tenants directly and things like that. If you have the funding, or need to figure out how to leverage the funding for new IT systems, or platforms or software that you want to get in. I mean, that could be a smart investment for your organization's, future efficiency. And then there's that systemic capacity building. So, we've got our individual, we've got our organizational, but us as a housing authority, we are, run by federal programs and things like that. And we see things comprehensively as well that we need change to happen. And so working with different lobbying groups, someone like NIHC that's out there in DC working with elected officials and lawmakers, making change, being involved in those NIHC legislative conversations and webinars and stuff, help us explain to them, here's what's happening in our communities and within our housing authorities. Make sure you're bringing this to DC for us. Having that strong voice is important. Being involved also in your regional housing associations is another way to make that voice heard, as well as raising public awareness. A lot of people don't realize uh, the issues we truly have in Indian housing. They may compare us to, maybe public housing and stuff like that. And they don't realize, the reality of the overcrowded and homeless conditions our people live in, or the substandard conditions because we don't have the funding out there. A lot of times, people think it's just us not spending our money and doing what we need to do. And in reality, we don't have enough money to do what we want to do. And so, raising that public awareness, whether it's within your local community or, more comprehensively, is also a way to build our systemic, the capacity, of what we do in Indian housing. So those, professional development skills will come in handy. Employee development is recognized as a strategic tool for an organization's continued growth, productivity, ability to retain valuable employees. So when we want to do professional development, I am one of those HR people and housing people that I live for professional development. Long before I was out here teaching you guys in a professional development standpoint, I was working in housing, and one of the things, I would ask is, why aren't our people going to conferences? Why aren't they going to these trainings and stuff? Let's figure out how to make this work. Because it is important. You need to gain administrative, BOC, and tribal council support. You need to sit down and figure out how development, professional development fits into your workforce planning, and a succession process and a retention program. Your organization obviously is going to have problems obtaining funding and support from the top. But if you come in with a strong foundation and a plan to support why you're asking for more professional development, you're probably going to have more people decide, nope, this is what we need to do. Involve the management. Once you involve your executive level, administrative, it's going to be a little bit easier to get that BOC or tribal council support for that. Your supervisors, those are the ones that are playing a vital role in ensuring the connection between professional development and real world implications. So being able to say, this admissions and occupancy training will help me, reduce an administrative burden, that we see, doing all of these paper files, and we want to learn how to, retain these records a little more efficiently, and being able to, develop that, so that we have more time to talk with our tenants. We want to be able to make those connections, when we, present an idea for professional development. It needs to relate to the performance management. If you're an A&O, do I suggest taking a management class or a maintenance class? Absolutely. On the administrative level, understanding why work orders need to be a certain way, is important, so that, for cross-training purposes. But you don't want to go and take something way far-fetched, that is not related to the performance of your job. So make sure, that professional development relates to what you're doing and or your long-term goals. You also want to understand what the employee values. I have had housing authorities that have worked with staff that really want to get into real estate. They've worked in their home buyer programs or, in these rental assistance programs for so long. And they're like, look, we want to do something. We want to be a real estate agent on the side, and here's how I feel like it can help our housing authority. And so the housing authorities have been paid to, help that individual get the certification as a real estate agent. And now they assist, in the Section 184 program or a home buying program, at a different capacity and a different level. And then know what the desired outcomes are going to be with these, professional development activities. What are going to be skills, and then report them. I have one housing authority I work with that they are required when they get back from a training that they fill out a little form that says what training they went to, what they learned, how it's going to relate to their future job, and would they recommend this training to other staff. Simple as that. It holds you accountable and makes sure and it ensures that you are, meeting the outcomes and objectives and the vision and mission of your organization. So these are, some of those professional development methods that are out there, so we talked about these a little bit, some coaching, mentoring, individual development plans. So those one-on-one plans very specific to your role and function of the job, cross training, on the job training, classroom-based learning such as this, job rotation, and job shadowing, maybe going and working in a little bit in other departments, or, maybe someone's going to be out on maternity leave and you don't have the money to hire a temp. And so you're kind of rotating and you're helping, another department in that role, and you're getting an understanding of what they do as well. And then job enrichment or job enlargement. Some of those issues that we see in professional development is that lack of accountability. People just going to go take a training because they want to take one, because they want to leave the office and go to Vegas or go to San Diego or wherever all these fun places, that we get to host all of our trainings, which FYI, everybody, NIHC's big training next year, our conference next year is in Hawaii. So, and it is a valuable one for tribal or tribal housing. So, but holding yourself accountable for, that those professional development opportunities, making sure the funding's there, and making, that you can leverage the funding to do those professional development programs. Making sure it's effective, to your organization, how you're going to apply it, that application to your role. Sometimes we do have those generational issues. We may have, elders on our board of commissioners or, within the organization that just don't see the reason why we need to go to a training to learn something that we've been doing all along. And being able to, explain that there is this change factor that's happening, and we need to kind of grow and continue to change with, housing as an industry. And then what the expectations are. Maybe you expected a training to be one thing and you got there and you're like, oh no, this isn't what I thought. Knowing what those expectations are before you go is important. And then obviously a lack of technology. If you have internet issues and stuff, it may be hard to sit in a webinar like this, or maybe or other webinars and things like that, and maybe you don't have the technology, or the capacity, with your IT staff to even bring in larger IT systems, or new financial management systems or work order systems to, help things, build your capacity and be more efficient. Those are all issues we see in Indian country when we are wanting to move towards, that professional development and capacity building. So when we look at our housing staff capacity, I want you to keep in mind that, under HUD ONAP competitive funding opportunities, as well as a lot of other federal funding opportunities, one of the number one rating factor when you're developing those grant applications is the capacity of your staff. That is the first thing they're going to look at. If you can't get enough points in that area, they don't look at your application even any further. And so I could tell you in a couple of weeks when I do the training on the ICDBG and IHBG competitive, we will spend a lot of time on that rating factor one and what you need to do to build your capacity. So this is just a little summary of, what to expect. And if you want to learn more, join us for those webinars in a couple of weeks. But applicants need to be able to provide a description of the roles, responsibilities, the knowledge and experience of key staff, which includes, day-to-day program management, consultants, contractors, everyone that's going to plan and manage and implement the project that you're applying for. And you need to ensure that their experience is recent, relevant, and successful to Indian housing. I know this one's a little bit hard to see, so what does that mean? When you're doing a project, it means that you have to demonstrate in your work plan narrative that you possess as an organization the managerial, technical, and administrative capacity necessary to carry out that project. So that doesn't include just your staff itself and the bios. It means you need to have a strong financial management system in place that outlines all of your procurement processes. You need to be submitting your audits on time. You need to not be having audit findings, and all of those things lend to the capacity of your housing authority as an organization and your housing staff capacity. When we talk about recent, relevant, and successful experience, It's usually experienced within the last 5 years is what HUD and other federal agencies typically want to see. That recent, that relevant experience is that it pertains to the specific activities that you're doing and moving forward with, and that it was successful. What measures, did you close out that grant quickly and efficiently and within the time frames? What were your outcomes? Did you get awards and recognitions towards it? Um, and then being able to identify what your gaps are in capacity. Again, so many of our organizations don't have enough staff to fulfill all of the roles that we need to do a good project. And so identifying what those capacity gaps are, and identifying which consultants you want to use, and what staff and consultants combined are going to manage and implement that proposed project. Those are all important aspects to keep in mind as you're building your capacity. When we're doing our monitoring and assessment, our self-monitoring and, our assessments of our organization, we are assessed by HUD and other funders, as well as through our audits, on our management capacity, on our need and our financial capacity. We can ensure that our performance as an organization by doing our annual self-monitoring. If we're meeting all of those goals and criteria that we, see in the self-monitoring process, it means we're developing, that we have a strong capacity to do the job that we need to do to get it for our organization. Other ways, as I mentioned, to build capacity is those partnerships. Contract out functions that you don't have the internal capacity to do. So those legal functions, those grant writing functions, those development consultants, maybe you've been writing the grants internally, yourself for a few years and you're not getting those, awarded to you. Maybe you need to take a step back and look and see, wait, where are these, reviewer, requirements saying? Are they saying we're lacking capacity here? So we need to hire a consultant to come in and help us build our capacity on this end so that we can write better grants. Or maybe, we just don't have the time to write a grant. And so let's hire someone to do that for us. Maybe we need a development consultant that comes in and sees the overall, housing development that you want to build and construct, and they can help us, leverage the long-term goals of that project and all the funding resources that need to go into it. That's okay. When they were doing the housing needs survey in 2017, for housing authorities and tribes, they actually asked about housing capacity, and nearly all the survey respondents that they talked to said that their organization does contract out for a range of administrative and building related functions. Some of the functions that they said that they contract out are things such as legal help, construction work, IT components. Even 43% contract out maintenance services. They might not be able to have a full force account staff. Many still contract out finance and accounting services. They have those fee accountants on board and they don't have an actual finance department. Others contract out building management and operations. Other things that they've mentioned that they've been contracting out, over time, people to help do rent collection, HR services, project management, and grant consulting. These are all areas that if you even have those outside consultants involved in your organization day to day, it builds your capacity to move forward as a whole. So, in closing, I just want to say, capacity building is whatever is needed to bring your organization, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a tribal administration, whether it's, your tribal housing authority, to the next level of operational, programmatic, financial, or organizational maturity so that you can effectively and efficiently advance your mission into the future. Capacity building is not a one-time effort to improve short-term effectiveness. It's a continuous improvement strategy toward the creation of a sustainable and effective organization. And so, keeping that in mind as you, start determining, what you need to build your capacity, utilize this training. The webinar is there in the files that you can download and look at. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to open the door for some questions. If any of you guys have those, go ahead and drop those in the chat and we can, ask and answer those. In the meantime, I'll throw up my contact information as well. I do go out there and work with housing authorities to help build their capacity. Do some strategic planning, help assess, what those needs are for all of you. So feel free to reach out to me if you need that. Some of those things can be, done, through technical assistance through Native Learning Center. And, uh, you know, let us, help build your capacity with your organization so you can move forward, and help grow your communities. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in. It looks like Lewis is dropping in the survey link there into the chat box as well. So definitely appreciate you providing feedback to the webinar. I appreciate all of you joining me today as we went through capacity building. Like I said, it's an important aspect of, growing our organization. And I wish you all well and hope you have a good rest of the week.
Well, thank you so much, Brandy. We really appreciate you coming out and speaking to us. I'm sure everybody thought it was very informative. I want to give people a few minutes or two to ask any questions they might have. And of course, I put the survey link actually into the chat. So if you could do us a huge favor and fill that out for us, that's very, very important for us. It really helps us know what we're doing right, and more importantly, know what we're doing wrong so we can make it better. So thank you so much. There's a question. Would anyone online like to collaborate with me? Oh, see, Wes, that's a great idea. That's a great thing. This is a great opportunity to do that. Is getting everybody to collaborate because you're here. Why not make some new friends and see if you could help each other out?
Absolutely. I was just talking to the team upstairs and before this webinar, and one of the best ways to collaborate and grow your capacity is work with other tribes. Work with those in your community. Work with those in your region, or in other regions. It's a good way to get input in what other people are doing and how you can make change within your organization.
Our next webinar will be July 27th, 2022, Urban Native American Housing, presented by Shelley Tucciarelli and Turtle Clan Development Services. That will be at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, and 11 a.m. Pacific. And of course, registration is 100% free. You can access any of our recorded webinars anytime at Arcatheta Online. Please visit our website at www.nativelearningcenter.com. You can always check out any of our upcoming events through Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Twitter. You also can download our Hobothanga podcast that's usually released every Wednesday through directly online at our site or through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Simplecast. Well, thank you so much for attending this webinar. Like I said, we can't thank you enough for coming by. We love giving out this information, and we're hoping you got everything you needed today. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to connect with you real soon.
Thanks, everyone.